Hi everybody, welcome to my channel. Today, art doesn't make mistakes, and mistakes are just additional layers. You'll see what I mean. So I'm working on my 9x12 Canson Mixed Media art journal, and this has been gessoed, and I've decided to brayer on the paint. I am going to show you a workaround for those of us who can't draw. And I want a fairly neutral background, and I thought that brayering on paint would give me that. I didn't want a whole lot of pattern, but I did want some interest. So I'm brayering on green yellow and this Amsterdam blue green on top to go with the dragonfly that I am going to be doing. So I'm brayering up and down and across, keeping it straight. I don't go at angles. I'm adding white to knock it back a little bit. And I'm really liking the color combo here. This is a winning color combo to use on any art journal page. Then I decide I'm going to add some quinacridone magenta just for a little pop of some additional color. I'm keeping this fairly neutral, but I want to have some interest, and that's my thinking right now. And then I'm going back and adding more color. So when you're brayering, you're just building up color. Some of that white space is there, and you just add colors as you go till you get a background that you like. So this dragonfly comes from supercoloring.com, and I'm just cutting off the excess just so I can position it and get an idea of where I want this dragonfly to go. Now, I could freehand the dragonfly, but I lack confidence, so I'm going to use graphite paper. It's like carbon paper, and the graphite is on the underside, and I'm going to slip that underneath whatever I want to trace and transfer onto my background. And I'm going to use a pen, and I'm going to rub fairly hard and get a thick line here because my background is fairly busy and I still want to be able to see it. So that's why you see me going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. I want a bold line. And I can see that line, although I do off camera go over it to make it darker so you can see it on the camera. So you need to, if you're going to transfer using graphite paper, you don't want a dark background, although you can get white graphite paper as well, if that's what they call it. Transfer paper maybe is what they call it. Now it's very, very faint, but I can see it, but I do, as I said, draw it a little darker so that you can see it on the camera. Now I'm using my angle brush and black acrylic paint, and I am basically shading around it, or outlining, I guess more so, the dragonfly. And I'm going to make that dragonfly pop out of that background. Now, because I didn't want the dragonfly to have all those patterns like you usually have a stenciling and stamping, that's why I chose to do the brayered background. And based on the title, Art Doesn't Make Mistakes, you know this is going to be a bit of a journey because it doesn't quite work out the way I envisioned that it was going to work out. So I ended up doing a little bit more work and a little more layers than I would have otherwise. I'm loving the brayered look on the dragonfly. But I'm thinking right now that my background is a little too blah, a little too lacking. There's not enough interest there. So there, my dragonfly, I've transferred it with graphite paper. So because I thought my background lacked interest, I am doing some stenciling and stamping, not where the dragonfly is, but everywhere else. So I'm using this stencil, it's called Bubbled Circles, and I'm using white acrylic paint. And adding those circles. I thought that would look very nice, the air and the background of the dragonfly. But it actually didn't have the effect that I want it to. I like a lot of the components of this one, but together. This one's called Halftones. And I'm using that magenta. I'm still thinking that I want a pop of color. I'm thinking, oh, if I add a little bit of color, it's just going to make it more interesting. And what I think these additions have done is really muddy the waters. It's just not, the background's there and it's okay, but I'm not loving it. I grab this stamp. I can't remember the name of it. If I find it, I will put it in the description box below with the names of the stencils. And I'm stamping. It's kind of like a honeycomb stamp. But that didn't have enough weight. So I decided to leave the background alone, and I'm giving a wash to the dragonfly wings. I'm using that blue-green from Amsterdam, and I've watered it down. Now I can still see the brayered texture coming through, because when you brayer, you get a certain amount of texture, so that doesn't go anywhere even though you've covered it up. I'm loving the color of that wing. I'm loving how you can see some of that brayered texture. And then I use the yellow-green, which is the other color that I use in the background for the top wings. And I'm extremely happy right now with the dragonfly. I think the background, as I'm looking back, it's not bad, but it's not what I had in my mind. So for the body of the dragonfly, I am mixing Prussian blue and Payne's gray. Payne's gray is a bluish gray. I wanted it dark, but I still wanted to have that blue tone. Please take the time to subscribe to my channel. Click on the bell and select the option to be notified of upcoming videos. That way you won't miss any tutorials. So, because I'm not happy with the background, I grab the same stencil that I used before, that bubbled circle stencil, and that blue-green, and I'm stenciling, I thought, oh, a swoop of bubbles above and below the dragonfly. It just needed to have some weight. And I was happy with this, kind of. So it was at this point that I actually did walk away. I left it in the studio, I went and had lunch, I let it sit, I took pictures, just looked at my camera. What do I like? What don't I like? And I'm thinking, what can I do? How can I change it? Or is it good? And don't be afraid to walk away. Give it time. Because sometimes when you come back, you see it with fresh eyes and it isn't as bad as what you thought, or you have a solution. So I decide I'm going to edge my page with the black acrylic paint. just to see if I'm happy with the background, with everything. Now I love, love, love the dragonfly. But I want to give it a background that it deserves. People ask, my tabletop, I have a sheet of glass right on top of my entire table. It's great for and easy to clean up. Now I decide I'm going to add some highlights to some of those circles. And I like the effect this gives. It brings them out, adds a little more interest to the background. You can see how it just makes them pop. You can see a close-up of the wings. Don't you love that texture that's there? So I decide that the rest of it I'm going to do a wash with white acrylic paint or white gesso and just knock back some of that background that I'm not in love with. Now all the layers still show through. It wasn't a mistake. It's just now an additional layer. And I like this much better with the white there and the circles. They're not competing. I thought maybe that too much of this was competing with it. So I'm thinking whitewashing was a good idea. You can still see the pattern. You can still see the texture. And then I grab this stencil one more time, bubbled circles, and I fill the entire background with these circles and that blue-green paint. I get some a little darker than others. And I just fill that page up. And I'm happy now. It took a while. But I'm not done. So I grab this stamp from Faded Type. It's a Stampers Anonymous set that I love. I'm adding some black archival. I just want a little bit of script. You can't see it, but you'll see it in the close-ups at the end of the video. Still needed more. So I decide, you know what, I'm going to switch to the dragonfly, and I'm using iridescent medium, and I'm thinning it somewhat and painting it over the dragonfly wings. This is giving it an iridescent shine, just like the dragonflies would have. You'll be able to see it in the close-ups at the end of the video. You can still see the texture, the pattern from the brayering of the paint on there, but you're adding that iridescent layer. You can see a little bit of it there. Now I want it more contrast, so I grabbed this Stampendous dot stamp, and I'm just using black acrylic paint that I'm brayering on it. And this is just adding a little bit of contrast, and yeah, it's exactly what, in my mind, this background needed. So I kind of kept to the circles. I love the bold black outline that I did with my angle brush on the dragonfly. That really made it stand out. You want to clean any acrylic paint off of your stamps if you use it with your stamps. I selected a sentiment from my Winged Wonders sentiment pack. It says, dragonflies are keepers of dreams. Then I grabbed this chicken wire reverse stencil, and I'm using the blue-green and putting a pattern on the dragonfly wings. I love how that turned out. It's very subtle, but it just added that little bit extra. Thought of using the halftone stencil on the bottom wings, but went back to the chicken wire reverse stencil. I try using that green yellow. It is not showing up. So I wipe it off and I grab silver. Which is very, very subtle. White would have worked as well. So look at your stencils. If you don't have the chicken wire reversed one, snakeskin stencil, sea bubbles, there's lots of stencils that I could have used that would make interesting pattern for dragonfly wings. Now I'm just shading around the sentiment to make it stand out a little bit more. And then I'm peeling off the tape that to protect the coils, and I heat it up. That way it releases the glue and you don't rip up the paper. So there is the finished page. Like I said, it was a bit of a journey, but there are no mistakes. There are only additional layers. Now let's go get creative.